I was elected at the age of 25 actually, and I was the youngest person to be elected at that time. I think I'm the youngest woman still, so that's something to be proud of. You know, making yourself as a politician or as a community activist to go into the communities, and you know, if there's already an established organisation, to sort of infiltrate yourself into what's already happening, as opposed to thinking that those networks don't exist. I was on the demonstration at Force of Ran Mine in Merthyr on Saturday, and there was a lady who'd come from the Forest of Dean, and she was in her 60s, I'd say, and she was saying she wanted to start something in her area, but there was nothing happening. And I said, well, let's be honest, you've got to start there, even if it means doing one little activity. So she said, oh, I've got this idea of everybody at a certain time of day coming out with a poster from their homes going, climate change is a problem, we need to, you know, as a picture campaign. Just people getting out, doing a poster, standing outside their doorstep. It's realistic, it's doable. I said, yes, but you have to organise that, and then you can start something. So even if it's a tiny thing, I'd say, you know, my advice is don't wait for other people. If you're waiting for other people, you may be waiting a long time, but there will always be someone else there who will join in, and then you can work something together, either set up a WhatsApp group, set up a little support group locally, have a public meeting. Even if there's 5 or 6 people who turn up, please don't get despondent. I've been in meetings, even as an established politician, where there's been, you know, 10 people in the room, but then you build on that and you say, okay, that's 10 people, but those 10 people as well, those 10 people have skills.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of the Welsh Dream podcast. So as you can see from behind me, we've got a new sign. I'm really excited about that. So today we've got a wonderful guest, Bethan. So I'll just leave it to you, Bethan, to introduce yourself briefly.
Hi, I'm really pleased to be here in Swansea. I'm Bethan Sayed, and I work for an organisation called Climate Cymru. That's a network of organisations campaigning on climate issues. But before that, I was a member of the Welsh Senedd for 15 years for Plaid Cymru, representing this area in Swansea. So I'm pleased to be back and to be chatting to you today.
Oh, great. Okay, so I guess on that, do you just want to tell us a bit more about your background, the work that you've done, I guess, previously as a member of the Senedd, as well as now more into the Climate Cymru work that you're into?
Yeah, so I was elected at the age of 25 actually, and I was the youngest person to be elected at that time. I think I'm the youngest woman still, so that's something to be proud of. And I campaigned on many different issues in this area and beyond, lots of issues in this area with regards to obviously poverty and trying to help asylum seekers and refugees through housing issues, dampness, talking to Clear Springs quite a lot about those issues, also raising awareness on a national level about issues surrounding eating disorders. That was a passion of mine, and also actually climate issues and open cast mining, which is something we want to end in Wales, coaling generally. So I had diversity of issues, loved going and talking to different groups, but also, trying to make a difference to the people of Wales. So I was always an activist, always someone who got involved and stuck into things. Probably from an early age, growing up in the valleys in Merthyr, parents always involved in social issues, and it was just something natural for me to get involved in politics, not because I wanted to have a title or anything, but because I wanted to do something good for the world,
And you think you did?
Well, I mean, other people may have different opinions.
What matters is your opinion.
My opinion. I was young, and there's things I probably would change on some levels, but I think I did a lot of good as well in raising issues that people perhaps didn't want to, weren't on a higher profile, and I helped to create that momentum, and also showed that young people from certain backgrounds can get into politics and it's normal, and I want to try and do more of that, like try and encourage people perhaps who haven't thought of politics but are really good campaigners, really good speakers, really good communicators, to think that politics is normal for them to engage in, really.
And how would you go about doing that? Because actually, like you said, you still have an underrepresentation of a lot of communities in Wales in politics. I guess there's a lot of issues to that. Actually, firstly, what do you think those issues are, those barriers for people are? And secondly, what can we do to actually just bridge those gaps?
I think it's, it is complex, and it's probably something you recognise as well from doing community work. I think it's getting really, making yourself as a politician or as a community activist to go into the communities, and if there's already an established organisation, to sort of infiltrate yourself into what's already happening, as opposed to thinking that those networks don't exist, and to try and encourage them to get involved in either putting a petition in or setting up an idea for a campaign about an issue that's you're locally passionate about. And those things can mean then that people getting more engaged in other things. Just that one action, that's one small action. So for example, it can just be about, how frequent buses come down this road, or how, I can make my house more energy efficient. Small things can then lead to you, day-to-day things. But I appreciate for different groups it's harder. So I think, people, let's be honest, from groups that are privileged, have to say, well, how can we perhaps, not always have the power and put that on to other people, and, say, well, actually put our money where our mouth is. If we want to have more diverse representation in the Senedd, we'll have to stand down and let those people come forward and be a bit more bold about these things, because otherwise, it's not going to change. And mentor people to come through, as opposed to assuming somehow that you're going to be able to create a more diverse Senedd from hot air. That's just not going to happen. It's not easy, but I think working with people is going to make it happen. Me on my own, no, but with you guys or with other people, then yes.
So one thing that we've been met with, because we've actually recently started a bit more of the work in democracy, and just trying to have people understand that their voice actually matters. They can actually create the change that they want to see if they actually partake in democracy. So I guess the challenge has always been people feeling like their voice is just so small, it's too little, it's not just going to make a change. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, well, I always give this example. I represented for Talbot as well as Swansea, because I was a regional member of the Senedd, and there was a plan to build a massive super prison on a piece of derelict land, and we knew that a super prison of that nature wasn't needed for the prisoners that we create in Wales. It was just something they wanted to create to import prisoners really from England, and it would have been something that would have been a blight on the landscape for one, but also something we didn't actually need. And then we had a big public meeting, and people came up to me and said, Beth, we're never going to make a difference to this. The Ministry of Justice, the power of Westminster, why are we bothering? And I said, well, if we have that attitude, then we might as well, we will lose. I said, but no, we've got to think we can win this. And we held meetings, we put banners up, we had protests, and before they even got to the planning stages of putting this prison in, they decided to stop it. And then people said to me afterwards, do you know what, I'm going to campaign on X issue now, I'm going to do this because I know that my voice actually can make a difference. And I think sometimes it will take something like that for people to realise that they do have so much power.
And also people that listen, like you said, because you were in that position and you were actually able to get the crowd going. Sometimes just getting that ally, that person who's just going to help you, that knows how things work as well.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is a matter of that because people feel disempowered, isn't it? But sometimes you have to have faith in yourself and your community that you can do it as well. I'm very conscious of not wanting it to be me sort of fronting everything. But, we had the, community working group. We had meetings where they led stuff. So it wasn't just, oh, look at Beth and the politician. It was about them doing, creating banners, placards, getting together for socials as well, raising funds, because we had to do that for buses to Westminster or whatnot. So trying to make people feel that they own the campaign is really important. Okay.
I guess on that, we'd be curious to hear more about your journey into politics and what you were actually in there, your experiences as obviously a woman working in politics. because there's a lot of our listeners who are people who, you know, aspire to be a politician of some sort, whether it's on a local level or, on a regional level. It's just talking about how really they can take those steps to do that, and what your actual real experience was of it all.
Yeah, big question. I was involved in, the campaign at the time not to introduce fees for students in Wales. And so I did a lot of work when I was elected to be student president in Aberystwyth, to try and change how the situation was going to work in Wales. So spent a lot of time going down to the Assembly, as it was in Cardiff, campaigning, and then got more involved with Plaid Cymru as a party because they were campaigning about the same thing, and they gave me platforms on their press conferences or at their conferences or local events. So it gave me an insight into the party, because I'd never been party political before. It was more issue based, if it was a climate issue or if it was an international issue. So then, because I started to feel what being in party politics was like, I met some of the people, and so it was a chance to talk to people about what you can do to get involved. So then the next Senedd elections came up, and they said we had a party position of positive action, so women were at the top of these regional lists for the proportional representation element. It's convoluted, but anyway, it meant if you were a woman, you were more likely to get elected. So I won that election internally, but it took a lot of work because I had to, campaign internally in the party, ask people to vote for me, create leaflets to say what my experience was, and then stand up in a room of people and give a speech about why I was the best person for them to vote for. Before then, I was chosen to go to do a public vote for Plaid Cymru in this area. So what I would say if people want to get involved is, I wouldn't say you have to get involved in a political party first, even if you're doing stuff on a local level, and then you dip your toe in the water and see how you feel. And if there is then a political party, once you've read about them or engaged with some of them, even done work experience with some of them, that's an opportunity. Then you can think about, well, what level do I want to start at? I mean, I don't know, I must have had more confidence then than I do now, that I said I'm going to go for the national parliament.
As a local councillor.
I mean, I just went and said, well, I'll put myself forward. It was more just a punt, I didn't think that I would win. I just thought it'd be an experience in life. I genuinely didn't think
but
that.
But life is like this. What should be like this, I think.
Yeah. So, and also those elections were coming up before the council elections. So, I mean, council stuff is good to start with as well, if you want to do stuff on a local level. So that's something people can consider who are listening. But it's also, build a network of people around you. If you want to get elected, you've got to find people to vote for you, and, internally first in a party, and then, of course, then build your profile through your campaigning once you are selected. But there are other ways as well. The Women's Equality Network in Wales has schemes for mentoring that then can, not just for politicians but for businesses as well, but an element of that you can shadow a politician. So the Women's Equality Network is really good for women, but then the Senedd itself now has a scheme which would include people from diverse backgrounds as well, to be able to go and shadow and to do work experience with MSs. I personally feel that's the best way to get an insight. I did that
practically,
to see
what the job is on a day-to-day.
Don't get me wrong, it's not an easy course to follow, but nothing is really. You've always got to make that effort in life, but it's worth it if you feel passionate about representing your community and you want to make a difference. I think being elected is, for me, an extension of campaigning, but also a way that you have so much influence to try and change things. I think now I'm out of it, I realise more how much power I had. Even though I wasn't a minister, people still put so much focus on raising questions in the Senedd, changing legislation. Just having a voice makes a difference to people, and I didn't realise that enough, I don't think.
When you were there?
When I was there, yeah.
So what are some of the challenges that you did face once you then got elected and you were there?
Well, for me, I was pretty young and I hadn't run an office. I hadn't, had staff before.
So straight out of university?
No, I did. I worked for Leanne Wood, who was a politician for some time, and also Jill Evans, who was a member of the European Parliament. But yeah, it was on a
Different.
smaller level.
Yeah.
So I had a job, but not much life experience. I don't think you have to, but I think, you know, it's nice to have a mixture of people. But I didn't have that. So I had to suddenly run an office. I suddenly had to, like, you know, have staff and know all the stuff of how to support them, and I felt a bit intimidated because I just wanted to do the politics, really, but I had to do all the other things.
What actually runs in the back office, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that was like the challenge, and also being young and how you come over there. And I constantly felt that I had to prove myself more than other people, because, you know, how I looked, where I came from, my age, my sex, everything.
Yeah, I think that's the reality for so many people. Yeah, and imposter syndrome, I think, sometimes can just, you know, lurk around in that setting.
Yeah, because I suddenly didn't have the confidence that I had when I was standing. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I...
Not that I'm
You know, I think it took the first year, I didn't feel I was probably the best of me, because, you know, I felt I was floundering sometimes because processes were just... But, you know, once you're in it, then you can start to find your feet.
Yes. And then also you get people who are supporting you, you know, sort of cheering you along as well. And I'm sure you had mentors as well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, other people in the party or other female politicians like Leanne and such. But, you know, now it's much more streamlined, where once you're elected, they'll provide you with more support, because I think they've learnt from the early stages of devolution that some of us were left with not enough support when we needed more.
Okay.
So,
right. So
it's changed now. Much more mentoring, much more support at the beginning of your career when you get to the Senedd. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you've spoken a bit about the issues for women, particularly women with families in politics. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I just think it's really hard, generally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard anyway in life. I'm not saying politicians are any superior or different, but it's just really hard because of the times you've got to work, the hours you've got to put in, the expectations other people have of where you're going to be at a fete or a gala or a protest. And if you've got a child, sometimes that's not possible, or, you know, to take them is more of an issue to get everything ready and in the bag and sorted. But, you know, to be serious, you know, there's no crash childcare facilities in the Senedd, which I think should be in place, only because, you know, lots of childcare facilities finish at 6, and you know, the Senedd does not finish at 6. So that's something I've been campaigning on. Also, I had to campaign for my own maternity cover when I was pregnant, because there was nothing in place. So I found that really odd it was just like I would go on maternity leave and there would be this vacuum really of me. So I managed to get a part-time member of staff that was basically, I wanted to call it a locum MS, as Stella Creasy did on a Westminster level. It didn't exist at all.
Wow, okay.
And it doesn't exist now. It was only put in place because, for me, so as a special request that I made, and to the Remuneration Board, which is the independent body that funds these type of things for politicians. And then Sarah Rees, who's now the head of Oxfam Cymru, was me in that time on a part-time basis. So again, that's something that's still missing. And also just the general way that, you know, mothers in politics and society at large are treated. You know, it's hard to do a full-time job, so campaigning for job share so that you can stand on a ticket for election with another, it doesn't have to be another woman, but for argument's sake, 2 women who want to do something part-time can stand, and they would share that responsibility in the Senedd. And I've actually spoken to a lot of people from lots of different diverse backgrounds, actually, and one of the councillors from Swansea who said she would put herself forward for national politics if there was job share, because she didn't feel that she could do it full-time. So I proposed this to the Senedd, but they've sat on it and they've noted the report I wrote. But it's still something I'd like to campaign on. I think it's something that we should be looking at for the Senedd.
I guess when you're saying that there was nothing when you were going through that, and you know it had to be put in place just for you, it then actually also again comes to show the lack of that diversity there, because if there had been more women, I'm sure some, do you know what I mean, like something would have been put in place earlier. So now it's still an uphill battle, but also at the same time there's no women that are coming forward who want to because there's just no support, so it's just that double-edged thing.
Yeah, it's a chicken and egg. Until the structures are changed, it shouldn't be for me as an individual to have to campaign while I'm pregnant for things to change for when I'm off or for other women in the future.
Yeah.
There should already be that institutional bias, I'd say, towards supporting us, and then you will see naturally then more women wanting to go for it because they say, look at that, that's a good example.
I can have it all, because sometimes I think with women it's either you choose between advancing in your career or actually settling down, having a family. Very few will have that balance of having it all, so that actually shares that message that you can. So
I mean, I was, I came at it in a weird way in the sense that I was elected young and then I had a baby when I was 38. So I then, I was much older then doing these things, but often that's not the case. And we do need to support younger women who, have those responsibilities, but also the aspirations,
Yeah. So on the Welsh Dream podcast, we normally ask, what is your Welsh Dream to our guests? And normally that's at the end when we close. But then for you, I do think your Welsh Dream has probably informed, every single thing that you've done, really. To some extent, you can tell me if that's a yes or no. What is your Welsh Dream?
Well, my ultimate dream, if I have to be put on the spot, would be to have a Wales that's free. So that means an independent Wales.
Right.
But that has to come with social justice at the heart of everything. I see some people campaigning for an independent Wales and they don't really talk about the structures or the values of that independence. For me, it means, people who come here from other countries are equal to us. It means, creating a fairer society. It means that everybody's treated with dignity. And it means that we can create something with really strong social values that are based on not having a royal family that is Republican. So that's my ultimate dream. But I think, every day what I get up for to do is to campaign on issues where, the small guy is always losing, where we have to really fight for people who perhaps don't have so much of a voice. So that gets me motivated on a day-to-day. But the ultimate dream would be to see my nation free from Westminster. But that doesn't mean that we have to, look inwards. It means, we look outwards to the world in an international way, and we do continue to work with other countries, but from the power of having everything in Wales, from international affairs, from the military, everything within our control. So that's what I would say.
That's a big dream.
That's a big dream.
That is a big dream, but then I think it's
we look at other nations in the world and, how they operate as independent nations. And, I think if you don't dream big, then, don't dream at all, isn't it?
I think linked to what you've just said, I would be keen to find out more about what you think the resources and the opportunities that we have here in Wales, because obviously for us to be independent, there is something that we can draw from, to strengthen us as a nation and actually, like you said, being recognised on an international level and just, be achieving what we need to achieve. So, what are some of those resources and opportunities that you think we have in Wales?
Well, I think the first one for me is obviously our natural resource, and I currently work for Climate Cymru. As I said, it's a network of organisations focused on how we can tackle climate change. And what I'm finding more and more daily is how little we have in terms of manoeuvres to change things, because a lot of that power sits with Westminster in London. So, for example, the Crown Estate, lots of the Crown Estate land is owned by the royal family, and we don't have access to the funds for that. In Scotland, the Crown Estate funding has been devolved, so given to Scotland. So if there is, say a wind farm or a solar farm that they want to create, they can do that because they've got the funding to do it. Or for example, access to the grid infrastructure that allows for you to link community schemes, renewable schemes, to the national infrastructure. Well, a lot of that again is not within our control here. And also over a certain megawatt, we can't make any new development in Wales. So natural resources, the use of water, wind, especially tidal in the Swansea Bay area. I fought for years to get tidal lagoons here, and hindrances all along the way, again, because Westminster rejected it. These are things that we could be doing if we had all the powers here in Wales at our fingertips, there is nothing to say that we are poor in that sense. Water, you know, we give water to England. We don't even charge for that water, you know, and it's a different nation. So, you know, those things we could be utilising in an independent situation and things that we need for our country to be able to prosper. If you look at Sweden, Denmark, you know, they run services in this country because they've been so successful in how they run their energy resources as independent companies, as independent countries. So this is the type of thing I think we need to start with.
Okay. Well, I guess right now already we are a bit progressive in terms of Wales, in terms of green jobs, that's the future right now, and I think there is still steps that are being taken. So how optimistic are you then as it stands in terms of a low carbon economy in Wales, which maximizes on our natural resources?
I think we're really good at doing what we can so far, but we need to be developing skills in the green economy so that people, for example, who may lose their jobs from, you know, carbon heavy jobs like Tata, open cast mining, that they're not left to sit on the dole.
That's a huge fear from a lot of people.
That's the reality. That's the kickback we get in the climate world when we're campaigning is, well, what about the jobs? And we, for one, don't want people to not have jobs. We want to say, though, that coal is, you know, for the past. We recognise that lots of our families come from coaling areas, as I do, but that's not good for the future. That's not healthy for individuals either. Lots of people died of lung diseases because they were down the mines. Let's not, you know, have rose-tinted spectacles about this. We want to create better jobs for people. So whether that's heat pumps, whether that's infrared jobs, whether that's to do, you know, with how we create better transport from, you know, hydrogen, for example. You know, how we do things now is really important so that we can be world players. And I think, you're right, we're doing good, but we can do better.
We can do more.
Yeah, so in regards to my work with Climate Cymru, the campaign I'm working on at the moment is called Warm This Winter, and it's a UK campaign, but we've Welshified some elements of it. So it's trying to look at the cost of living crisis, but how we can use solutions that we have within our control, so such as energy efficiency in our homes and more renewable energy to support people who are in, you know, those vulnerable situations. So, for example, if you've got a community renewable energy project in North Wales called Ynni-Ogwen, they create hydro from the water there. And any profit they make goes towards then creating a job for a local person as a fuel poverty officer that will go around the local community helping them with their bills and trying to help them pay those bills. But also then they will set up electric car club schemes so people can hire them and they can put solar panels on the local library so that the local library can save on their bills. So we are saying, well, yes, people are in this bad situation with the cost of living, but what are the solutions via looking at the climate emergency and such? So it's a really rewarding campaign because it's pretty positive. It's saying, well, yeah, we are in a difficult situation, but what are the things we can really do to change in our communities via renewable energy and such, you know? So it's been something I've gone into after a break from work, from having a baby. So I was quite nervous about going into a different type of job, but, you know, it's a really important one, you know, looking for the future generations. But it's also something I'm aware when I go to protests and stuff, it's not very diverse. There's not so many people from different backgrounds who, you know, attend events. We met at the Friends of the Earth one, and you've got your own opinions, I'm sure, about about that. And, you know, it's not for me to say this is how we can work to get people in from different communities, but we do have to put ourselves out there and not just say, oh, this is bad, there's only white people in the room. We have to say, well, how can we change that so the next conference we're not in the same situation, or the next demonstration we're not gonna, you know, be in that state. I do talk to people from different backgrounds. You know, my husband's from India, and I think people don't want to be saying, well, we'll just put this Asian up to do an interview just because they are
from in that sense.
That's the awkwardness, because sometimes they feel that they're being used as token gesture, but we want it to be, you know, meaningful and viable. And how we do that is obviously to ask those communities, you know, what do you feel, what can you do, what do you want to get involved with, and then it doesn't have to be awkward. Is how I feel things need to change.
Okay, actually, that's one bit. I think one bit that I wanted to sort of pick up on is how you've mentioned sort of the solutions for the cost of living crisis coming from, climate action. I think that just shows how interlinked some of these issues are, in terms of, poverty, both poverty, cost of living, and, the climate emergency. And we can learn from all of that and just actually maximize on the potential that communities have. So I think that's a really key point.
Yeah, when I did a survey with this campaign with the public online, asking if you could have more support for your energy bills by having, more energy efficiency in your homes, or would you support more renewable energy in your community if it meant your bills dropped? 90% people said yes, So when you take it to the real life bread and butter issues, people are not going to oppose a wind farm. But the way things are at the moment, quite often the profit goes to a company, a big conglomerate, or it goes to a government in another country, and so they don't see that benefit. So then you will get people coming out and campaigning against it. And I get it. So we need to really change that. So if they've got their bill at the end of the month and they see that wind farm has really helped them, then they're there. And that's what we have to do more in politics, not just the big stuff, but the real, game changer of people's lives and how they can live their own individual lives,
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is because, we started climate action work a couple of years ago, and like you said, I think the whole thing was realizing that our communities are just underrepresented in the climate movement, and yet they are the ones that are most affected by it. So there is definitely, an issue there. And one thing that we were met with was just, okay, this doesn't apply to me. Like all of this, my emissions are probably this small.
Tiny.
Exactly, and yet, all this pressure is coming that I should be making all of these changes. And also, it's not actually easy to make these changes, because I think sometimes it might be a little bit more expensive to do one thing over the other, but I think that's why it's then important to have these structures in place where it actually is easier for people to, change their habits if they need to, really.
Yeah, and that's why we had a debate recently on the campaign Warm This Winter in the Senate, and the government then made a statement saying they're going to be putting more money into energy efficiency. It's called the Warm Homes Programme. But they will focus on the most vulnerable first, the people who are struggling, who are in poverty, so that they can get help with insulation. They can get that put in without having to pay for it themselves. So then, yes, it's helping the people who feel, well, actually, I can't afford that.
Exactly.
Tell me to drive an electric car, but I can't, even begin to afford that. So it becomes less intimidating a prospect to feel that you can engage in that campaign then, because it's something that you can actually take part in, as opposed to it being for other people who are, in a different place in their life than you.
Yeah. And actually, as well, what you then mentioned about the whole climate movement in general, I think sometimes it's just important for us to be just meeting people where they are, because not everybody is just at the same level where they even have that understanding. So it's also just realizing, okay, who am I speaking to, and how do I make this relevant to them and applicable? Because I think everyone has a story. If you listen to even, and I know right now we don't have climate refugees as it were, but then a lot of people have come partly because of changes in the climate back home. It's also then even making that connection for them, because sometimes it's not there, and then that actually just has an impact, because people realize, okay, there's me in there, as opposed to this is just a big problem that they can't see themselves in.
Yeah, it has to be relevant to their lives, and we're all guilty of it sometimes. We'll talk about these issues to the extent of what we have lived experience of. But we have to understand that not everybody will perhaps empathise with that or get it, and how we can...
Like, people talk about the polar bears suffering, right? And I understand, like, fine, polar bear is cute, but then that is not, you just need to make it a little bit, like, bring it closer to home, a bit closer to home then.
The trouble is, when you talk about animals, people, I chair the companion animal welfare group for Wales as well, and I never had a problem raising stuff about animals, because there's always support for it. People have this soft, warm thing. So even if the climate, for example, if you're on Instagram scrolling, even if it is potentially sometimes about a polar bear or something, it can draw you in. So I think there's lots of different ways we can engage. But I take your point. Sometimes that's something people can't identify with.
Yeah, so a bit far removed,
a bit far away.
You could literally talk about the weather changes right here in Swansea. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's things that we are actually physically experiencing and living. So it's just sometimes making it a bit practical and not just this big issue somewhere else.
We see about flooding quite often, and I don't think people attach it so much to the climate problem. I see it even, in Pontypridd recently, in Neath, people have had flooding issues, but they don't engage with the climate campaigns. So we have a job to do as activists in this field to try and change the narrative as well.
Yeah, definitely. So how did your political career shape your activism now?
I think I took a break after I left, and I was thinking perhaps I should go into something entirely different as a career. But then I thought, well, as I've said with you in this podcast now, it's sort of like in your DNA, saying activism is my rent for living on this planet is true to me, It's not something I choose. It's just part of my whole...
Have to do it.
I don't get to choose. It's like in my body. So I thought, well, if I'm going to work and try and be flexible, I took on the job with Climate Cymru, and that inspired me because it was a relatively new organisation and it's a network. Sometimes we can work in silos in Wales, and because I have to work with lots and lots of different bodies, from the National Trust to Friends of the Earth to businesses to renewable energy companies. It's a way of pulling people together that might not otherwise talk to one another. So that I thought, well, that's nice to get involved in, as opposed to a big charity that perhaps has lots and lots of levels of bureaucracy. That really, and I had a lot of respect for Sam, who is the manager, who's done a lot. I think I do a lot of the communication stuff because I'm forward facing, but we can't forget that there's other people involved in Climate Cymru that do a lot of good work. We've got a nature positive campaigner, we've got somebody who does a lot of the communications and stuff, so we've got a great team now. And I think it was a good way to get back into work and politics, but in a different way.
Exactly. That's what I was going to ask. Were there some sort of lessons or knowledge that you did get from politics that's just helped you in your role right now?
Well, I think, I've got the benefit of knowing a lot of politicians now, so when I'm trying to influence and lobby them, it is, let's be frank, it is easier to be able to talk to them. But also I have the knowledge of how to run campaigns and how to put them in place, and that comes quite easy to me now. So it's a way then, but also things that don't come so easy is like writing reports to funders and trying to get help. But it's actually good to be able to do those things, to have to challenge myself with new goals, and work with people in different ways. I'm not people's boss, I've got a boss, so it's the dynamics have shifted.
So I think some of our listeners will be people that are passionate about a lot of different things, but then don't quite know how to use that passion or just how to go about it. So would there be any sort of advice or tips that you could give to people who want to either start a campaign or start mobilizing other people? Just anything really that could be useful for anybody who isn't sort of familiar with campaigning or activism.
Yeah, it's really difficult now because I'm so in a bubble of knowing where I come from. But I would say, even if I was on the demonstration at Force of Ran mine in Merthyr on Saturday, and there was a lady who'd come from the Forest of Dean, and she was in her 60s, I'd say, and she was saying she wanted to start something in her area, but there was nothing happening. And I said, well, let's be honest, you've got to start there, even if it means doing one little activity. So she said, I've got this idea of everybody at a certain time of day coming out with a poster from their homes going, climate change is a problem, we need to, as a picture campaign. Right. Just people getting out, doing a poster, standing outside their doorstep. It's realistic, it's doable. I said, yes, but you have to organise that, and then you can start something. So even if it's a tiny thing, I'd say, my advice is don't wait for other people. If you're waiting for other people, you may be waiting a long time, but there will always be someone else there who will join in, and then you can work something together, either set up a WhatsApp group, set up a little support group locally, have a public meeting. Even if there's 5 or 6 people who turn up, please don't get despondent. I've been in meetings, even as an established politician, where there's been 10 people in the room, but then you build on that and you say, okay, that's 10 people, but those 10 people
as well.
Those 10 people have skills.
Yeah, exactly. Use that. Yeah, 100%.
why should we offend the 10 people that's come by saying that's not good enough? And if you have that state of mind about things, then anything's possible. I think, yes, it's intimidating, but once you start doing it, you will get addicted, believe me.
And I think it comes actually to what Ryan was saying about a lot of it is about our control, what's in our control and our autonomy to do things, really. So I think it's just taking hold of that power that we have within ourselves, and then just starting, there's that quote, I forgot who said it, be the change that you want to see in the world. You just start there, and then, I think things actually just ripple out from that.
And I think now in the day, I sound really old saying this, don't I, but I'm going to say it anyway, in the day of social media, believe me, it is so much easier. When I started, you have to be putting posters up everywhere, doing things physically. Yeah. Now you start a group on Facebook, and people will appear and have that conversation with you on chat, so there are ways we can do things now that never was possible before, so use it and use it well.
Definitely. For you, how have you managed to stay authentic in everything that everything that you've done? You are.
It's hard, isn't it? Because sometimes I think I lost my way a bit, where you would just think, well, is it worth me doing that event because I've met them and I've done it 100 times? And that's when I thought, well, perhaps my time is up for politics, because I'm tired, I'm lacking ideas, I don't feel the passion anymore to go to this thing or whatever it is. And so then I thought, I want to be authentic, and I want to be true to myself, and I want to be keen and eager. And I was starting to feel the end of my career not so much like that. So to be authentic, I think, is taking risks. I could have just stayed in a comfortable 60 grand job.
And people do that for so long, and they just stop even contributing to anything. That's actually sometimes my frustration with some of the politicians. Sometimes it's just time to hand it over. And I think that takes a lot of, just courage, just boldness to just actually realize that, okay, do you know what, maybe I should just stop. Yeah,
somebody else now has got a chance to be in the Senate that probably wouldn't have if I'm not saying that, she may have beaten me, so I'm being a bit facetious there. Okay. She could have beaten me if she'd stood against me, in the internal elections, but she's, potentially I could have won, and then she wouldn't. Yeah. And then she wouldn't have had that experience now that she's the MS for South Wales West for Plaid Cymru. And she's getting a wealth of experience that she, and she's doing really well. She's a really good politician. So I feel then, well, that's really good. I'm not there, but you're not invincible either. There's other people that will come forward, and I think that's where some politicians feel, I'm so great, I'm so important. There's nobody could possibly do better than me and stay there forever. They don't want to hear it.
And they stop making actual changes for the people that you're there for. So
they stop. Well, I wouldn't say they stop caring, but they stop noticing so much. I think people still care, because I'd be wrong in saying people, are there for just, careers and titles. Maybe there are some, but I won't be naming them.
Yeah, we are naming them, but it's okay.
Yeah. But when people, what bothers me, you hinted on it, if people make bold statements saying, we need more diverse NF, we need, more black and ethnic minority. Well, unless you stand aside and you're, getting on now, then they're not going to come through.
There's no space for them, is there?
There's no space for them. 100%. So we can make all those statements then, and they mean nothing. So I think there is still room for change in that regard, We can't just rely on merit when it comes to getting different groups in. I swear if Plaid hadn't had their positive action policy in place, I would never have got into that Senedd, because they probably wouldn't have chosen a young upstart 24-year-old from the valleys, that didn't have much experience. They would have gone for the male in a suit who they knew from year zero. So, we have to facilitate change and put processes in place to help new people come through,
I think some people will challenge that and say that it is a form of discrimination in itself, you putting in place these structures to help another group over another. So,
But I think we're living in a society where it still supports, men, and we still see a lot of the same people in politics. And unless we put measures in place, for example, even women on boards, have quotas of women on business boards, these things happen in other countries, and then the narrative or the conversations change by virtue of having different types of people.
Because of the diversity of opinion, basically, yeah.
And I've talked to lots of people from, black and ethnic minority communities who, have that view and say, I don't want to be there because of what I look like or what my ethnicity is. But then I say, well, I still disagree because I was only there by the process because I was a woman, but that meant as a woman I would be raising issues like childcare. I would be raising issues that nobody else was raising in relation to eating disorder services. So yes, there are issues in terms of how it works, but ultimately that gets you in the door, that gets you a platform, that gets you somewhere, and I will never not support that. And that's why I call it positive action.
Right.
I don't call it positive discrimination. Because there's nothing for me that's discriminatory about it. If it's giving you a voice, then that's,
and you use the platform once you're there. I think I understand both sides, because I think I've been in some spaces where they're like, okay, maybe they want a young person, or they want a woman, or they want a woman of color. And sometimes it is a bit, okay, are they there because of my ideas and what I view on certain topics, or is it just because I tick all these boxes? So it is a bit, and also at the same time, you just then sometimes don't want to just be seen as, because you're the only black woman in the room, then you are the black voice. You're going to speak for, do you know what I mean? And again, it also then removes that whole, again, Wales is a nation of sanctuary. There's all these communities from all over the world, but then just because you're the only woman of colour in the room, then you speak for all those communities. No, you don't. So I think it's just, there needs to be a balance there.
Well, bless his soul, Stefan Lewis, my colleague, he died of cancer, but he was an excellent politician. And he told me, I'm not going to get elected to campaign on lots of youth issues as in a sort of box thing, because he was the youngest elected at the time. He was like, I don't want to be put in a box. So he actively then tried not to do that, and he did loads of other wonderful campaigns. But I think it's it's sad in a way that we have to think, well, I'm not going to do something because that's what people expect of me and ask of me. But I was young when I was elected, and yeah, you're right. You're expected to know everything about all young people. And I'm like, well, I don't know. There's some young people who may believe in, in abortion, or some young people who believe that the voting age should change. But I can't say that I can speak for them all.
For all of them, yes.
But I can speak for some of what the youth, the young generation believes in. So then I was more comfortable with, the reality then. But I get it. It's complex, and
that's what comes back though. I think sometimes what you meant when I asked you earlier about being authentic as well. I think even once you're there, then just using that space to actually then platform all these other things that you are passionate about, because now you've got the space. So I think it's really important to just still maximize on it. If there's positive action, just using that. Yeah,
I mean that's the difficulty. We can just carry on as we are and say, well, let's have merit involved and people need to just get up and stand. Well, the reality of the whole way that society works with its structures will work against people from ethnic minorities, because they're not at the top tables, they're not making the decisions in lots of areas. So if we leave it just to chance, I'm afraid nothing's gonna change.
Things don't change. That's the thing. Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been great talking to you, Bethan. I think you've got so much valuable insight and a different take on the world as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. But before we close, do you have any last thoughts? Any other words of wisdom to share with our listeners?
Well, I think it was just, you mentioned quite a lot about people having aspirations to go into politics, and I'm, again, just one person. But if there's one person watching or listening to this that wants to get involved, wants to chat about how politics works, then please let me know and contact me. I'm on bethan@climate.cymru, or it's Bethan Sayed now on Twitter. I'm always willing to chat to people, because I think even from when I was first elected, there was no youth parliament for Wales, and I made it something I wanted to campaign on to create that youth parliament, and it exists now to give young people a voice. So I'm always somebody who wants to get more people involved. So please talk to me, utilise that, and let me know if I can be of assistance, and it's great to be here.
No, definitely. Take that, guys. Okay, so thanks so much, Bethan, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Welsh Dream podcast. Bye.